Okay, so this morning everybody's talking about the tie between Susan Rice and this current idiotic venture into Syria. I think that this past 2 weeks has proved that Susan Rice is probably the worst national security advisor in the history of this country. It really goes to show that when you reward somebody for being a complete liar, having absolutely no integrity and willing to go on TV and just spin things that are not true, which is what she did in 2013, I believe, when there was the chemical attack in Ghouta, or was it, no, in 2012, there was the Benghazi terror attack on September 11th, 2012. When you reward somebody for that type of behavior, they just find it validating and they keep doing it. And the whole problem is that now she might have been caught in a lie that that might have been the truth, and I'll explain. I still am not convinced that the Bashar al-Assad regime did perpetrate the massacre, the chemical weapons attack in Idlib area in Syria. I have no sympathy whatsoever for the Assad regime. I think that if it were up to me, if this was an what would you call it, an organic or isolated situation where nothing else is affected, I would be fine with having them removed in any way possible, the Assads. But it's not. I think it affects so many other things in the region, and I still don't believe that he has the interests at the table right now because of the way things are going. I don't believe it would have been in his interest to use chemical weapons. There's so many gaps in the story, and I'm not the only person. And there's a lot of people, unfortunately, on the further sides of the right and left false dichotomy that are saying it. You know, I have to really live right now with the fact that my best, the best supporters of the position that I support are people that listen to like Democracy Now and even like other like far right publications. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm hoping that perhaps President Trump will use this to come to a settlement with Russia, to do the idea that I've told you about in my previous video regarding withdrawing troops from Russia, from Syria. I mean, withdrawing all foreign troops from Syria is the only solution. But what is this about Susan Rice? The problem is that if, as the Democrats are saying, that it was Bashar al-Assad that committed this act of violence, committed a chemical warfare attack, which is something that in the U.S. intelligence community, only the John McCain wing has been saying that they still have chemical weapons. Only the neocons, the open neocons in the center of the Republican Party, the establishment Republicans, have been saying that Assad still has chemical weapons. Now, I don't know, maybe they are right. Maybe they are. Now, what does that mean? That means that Rice and her colleagues in the Obama administration were lying for 3 years or 4 years or whatever it was about the fact that they had disarmed Assad and ended the threat of chemical weapons at the time. And it says here, this deal occurred, this is Legal Insurrection, I'm going to post a link. It says this deal occurred in September 2013. Then Secretary of State John Kerry appeared on Meet the Press 10 months later. We struck a deal where we got 100% of the chemical weapons out, Kerry claimed. At the time, the fact-checking website PolitiFact found Kerry's comments to be mostly true. However, given new evidence that Assad had recently used chemical weapons against his own people, PolitiFact was forced to revisit and revise its assessment of Kerry's claims. We don't know key details about the reported chemical attack in Syria on April 4, 2017, but it raises two clear possibilities. Either Syria never fully complied with its 2013 promise to reveal all of its chemical weapons, or it did, but then converted otherwise non-lethal chemicals to military uses. One way or another, subsequent events have proved Kerry wrong, the site ruled. Now, this problem is, it's probably, the problem is that the press is not giving the It's not describing the real dilemma here. Okay, you have Susan Rice, and John Kerry, by the way, the Secretary of State, the two top officials involved in this problem, and whoever was Secretary of the State at the time, I think it was Chuck Hagel, but I'm not sure. Those three officials, they were claiming that they could disarm the Syrian regime, and they then claimed that they did. Okay, and therefore you would come to the conclusion that A, they didn't have any chemical weapons in their possession at the time of this recent attack in April, or what would it be? It would be 5 days ago. I think it says April 4th. So yeah, 5 days ago, where did they get the chemical weapons if Syria was disarmed? Now there's a couple explanations. A, they did get new chemical weapons from a country like Iran or Russia or somebody else. Maybe they bought it. They could have cooked up new chemical weapons. That's a possibility. The question is, what's the motive for it? Okay, so let's put that on the side. The other question is, was it possible that some of those chemical weapons had already fallen into the hands of rebels or other groups that have their own nefarious reasons for using them in Syria when Assad was disarmed? Remember that Assad only controls, certain areas of Syria. There's plenty of other areas of Syria that are controlled by ISIS, al-Nusra, the Kurds. They're controlled by other rebel groups. So as much as you want to pin the blame on Bashar Assad, which I wouldn't care, because I have absolutely no sympathy. I think he's a horrible leader. It's his fault. Who can claim he's a great leader like some of these idiots do, these idiots on the left and the right? They claim that he's the legitimate leader of his people. He lost control of most of his country. Okay, he's an incompetent leader. If it was not for him, we wouldn't even be in this situation. He's totally to blame for this. Okay, it might not be that he perpetrated this attack, but he's to blame for all the situation that's led up to it. And don't give me this nonsense about him being the real secular guardian of Syria. Okay, fine. It doesn't mean that he's not an incompetent buffoon. And that also does not mean that we should be going to war, because honestly, we don't have anything to put there. We don't have an alternative to put in Syria. So I've already explained the dilemma here is that they claimed in 2013, or in 2014 they claimed retrospectively because the deal occurred in 2013. Kerry claimed in 2014 that Syria was 100% disarmed. If this narrative about the war being necessary is true, as the Democrats, as the Republicans, as Donald Trump is saying, then Susan Rice lied, John Kerry lied, they don't know that, or Syria did produce new chemical weapons from either from their own laboratories or from importing from somewhere else, which doesn't make any sense because Syria has actually been succeeding at the war without chemical weapons. It doesn't strategically. It's a move that doesn't have any explanation. Okay, and I would love to be a world where we don't have to defend the innocence in any case of somebody like Bashar Assad, but that's the case today. There's nothing more you can do to convince me, unless you produced documented proof of him actually ordering the attack, or you were to get an admission from one of his colleagues in his government that he was doing it. You can't convince me right now. Okay, now I would love to be proven wrong, but I just don't see it happening right now. The other issue is that the Syrian attack, the Syrian chemical weapons attack, it definitely shows that the Rice, well, she doesn't have a department. She's just an advisor within the White House. Their perspective on Syria has been a perspective that's just to manage the press, to manage it's a PR stunt. All they would do for 8 years was condemn and rail against the Syrian regime. And you know what? That really doesn't cut it. Okay, they went and deposed a dictator who was roughly the same level of brutality, Muammar Gaddafi, and then they didn't do anything. They really let Libya go to hell. And in the case of Syria, they got gun shy about it, and then all they did was complain and complain and complain. It's the same pattern. It's the same pattern, by the way, that Madeleine Albright and Anthony Lake, these are people you don't know about. Anthony Lake was the National Security Advisor under Bill Clinton. The diplomat at the UN at the time was Madeleine Albright. The Secretary of State was Warren Christopher, who was kind of old enough to probably, he was probably worried about himself dying. He wasn't worried about anybody else dying. So in Rwanda and Somalia, they also dropped the ball because they were so gun shy after their debacle in Somalia, which was of their own creation. If you watch my review of Gary Burns' book, it's called Crisis of Character. The Clinton defense apparatus didn't support the troops in Somalia because they didn't want optically for it to seem like they were doing a military intervention. So the troops did not get adequate support. Okay, it's the same thing that happened in Libya. Okay, the reason that there was the Benghazi issue was because the Obama Defense Department and the Obama State Department under Hillary Clinton did not want to commit to saving the people that were stationed there. For them, it was like, you're over there, you fend for yourselves. It was the same thing in Somalia. They limited the amount of weapons that they would have to defend themselves against these militia members. If they would have adequately supplied the mission there, we probably would not have had what's called Black Hawk Down, the Battle of Mogadishu. It probably would have happened very differently. It wouldn't have even been close. But, when you do military interventions as a means of covering your ass, which is how the Democrats do it, which is, it's the same problem as what the Republicans do. The Republicans get into crazy wars that at least they're willing to go and say, well, we're going to win this war. The Democrats, except for Vietnam, the Democrats, which was not what the war that they got into, the Democrats will get into a war and just fuck it up all the way because they don't want to appear to be, an occupying power or whatever it is, except for Vietnam where they were. We have to get away from this interventionist foreign policy. And Susan Rice is the worst example of somebody who's such a weasel. She has absolutely no integrity. She lied about Benghazi. Now she's caught in a bind because she claimed that, okay, I think I may have confused you here. Her claim in 2013 and 2014, along with John Kerry's claim, where she said, we were able to find a solution that didn't necessitate the use of force that actually removed the chemical weapons that were known from Syria. So she claimed that back then. And then now they have to live with either admitting that they were wrong about that they did not clear all the chemical weapons from Syria, or come up with some preposterous theory that Syria produced these chemical weapons themselves so they could get caught using them in a situation that makes no logical sense. So they have to either admit that they were wrong about that, or they have to admit that it was not Assad that used these chemical weapons, it was somebody else. And you know what? I'm not happy about this. I would much rather, you know me, I would much rather be talking about the absolute lie and fabrication of Obamacare than talk about this. But this is what we're dealing with right now. And believe you me, I will be talking about Obamacare again. I'm not leaving it alone. But this is the dissection. Legal Insurrection has a very good breakdown of it. I'll post a link. If you want, follow H.A. Goodman on YouTube. Okay, I don't have a great audience. H.A. Goodman follows this hour by hour, basically. He'll tell you the real score. We are being completely hoodwinked by deep state, the military-industrial complex that wants us to continue to support the government and the defense contractors, funnel all that money to the state. We need to go back to the principles of limited government and personal responsibility. That's not H.A. Goodman's opinion, but he at least validates what I'm talking about with regards to foreign policy. Anyway, this is Ramon with Bold Like a Leopard, and we'll see you around the bend.